Well, today we're going to be talking about Augustine on good and evil. And we're going to start with his greatest sin. Now, what is his greatest sin? In his own opinion. Stealing the pears, yes. Okay, now he does a lot of things. I mean, he falls deeply in love with somebody, then his parents say, well, she's not suitable for you, so he dumps her, devastates her. She goes back to Africa basically saying, I'll never be with another man because I love you, I love you. He says, well, goodbye. And then his parents are going to arrange a marriage for him. And so he says, well, yeah, okay, I'll wait around for you to find the right girl. But that's going to take some time, so he takes up with someone else. He's got girlfriend number one, and so on. And then the parents adopt him, and so he gets it. But anyway, yeah, the greatest sin is actually the pears. Now, why? What makes stealing the pears so bad? After all, he admits to a lot of bad stuff, right? Even as a baby, he was sinful. And then he does all these other things, and he talks a lot about his imprisonment by sexual desire. But nevertheless, it's the pears that are worst of all. What makes the pears worst? Yeah, Rachel?
It wasn't that they needed it or anything. Like, they just did it for the theft.
For the sake of the theft. Yes, okay, good. Most things we do wrong, and he talks in a section about the three lusts and the sources of this. Most things we do wrong are done for the sake of some good. In fact, last time we were talking about famous first lines. Here's another famous first line for you. Thinking about good and evil. Our classic text is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And does anybody know the first line of the Nicomachean Ethics? In this case, there's no Curry Lane t-shirt that helps you. Good. Every art, action, inquiry, etc., is aimed at some good. Exactly. So I'll just say every act and simplify it a little bit. Every act is aimed at some good, says Aristotle. Okay? Now, here's what's so terrible about stealing the pears. It's a counterexample to that. Now, in part, Augustine is critiquing Aristotle here. He's saying that's not right. It's not true that every act is actually aimed at some good. Some acts are aimed at evil for the sake of evil. Okay? He says, we stole the pears, and why? Because we wanted the pears? No, we had better pears at home. In fact, we ate a few, but then we threw the rest of the pigs. Okay? We didn't really need the pears. It wasn't aimed at that for good at all. And so, Augustine is saying, many acts are, but some are aimed at evil for its own sake. Okay, and he gives this as an example. Now, when he describes this, it's an interesting description. And actually, it's not entirely clear how to interpret what he says. Let's start at the beginning of the paragraph. Theft receives certain punishment by your law, Lord, and by the law written in the hearts of men, which not even iniquity itself destroys. For what thief can with equanimity endure being robbed by another thief? He cannot tolerate it even if he's rich and the other is destitute. By the way, there's an echo of that later in the Western tradition in ethics. Somebody repeats that line almost verbatim. Who is it? Kant, who is saying, look, even the robber, even the murderer, they aren't living by some other rule. They're living by the rule that the rest of us live by and claiming an exception for themselves. Does the murderer want to be killed? Does the thief want to be robbed? No, says Kant. Which shows you, in his view, the fundamental moral mistake is making an exception for yourself. Well, he's really pulling that directly out of Augustine. Now, Augustine is saying it not quite for that reason, not to support the categorical imperative, but for another reason. He says, I wanted to carry out an act of theft, and did so driven by no kind of need, other than my inner lack of any sense of or feeling for justice. Wickedness filled me. I stole something which I had plenty, and much, which I had in plenty of much better quality. My desire was, well, what? Was it for some good? He says, to enjoy not what I saw as stealing, but merely the excitement of thieving and the doing of what was wrong. Now, let's think about this for a moment. He's saying this act is aimed at evil for its own sake. It's not aimed at any particular good, or at least it seems as if he's saying that. On the other hand, he says, well, it was aimed at the excitement of doing something wrong. And yet later in the paragraph, he comes back and says, let's see, Yeah, I became evil for no reason. I had no motive for my wickedness except wickedness itself. It was foul, and I loved it. I loved the self-destruction. I loved my fall. Not the object for which I had fallen, but my fall itself. My depraved soul leaped down from your firmament to ruin. I was seeking not to gain anything by shameful means, but shame for its own sake. Now notice, most actions are not really like this. Most of the time when we make choices, it's like this picture, which we've, I think, drawn before. We're comparing different kinds of goods, okay? And so Aristotle's model is that most of the time practical reason is in some sense calculative. We're calculating goods or expected goods. And we're thinking, okay, yeah, there's some goods over on this side, and there's some goods on this side, and we have to make a comparison. Now sometimes the comparison's very easy. You're on a game show, and the host says, well, you choose this. You know, you've got, let's say, $10,000, or you can have what's behind the curtain. You say, oh, I don't know, it's hard. And they say, well, I'll show you what's behind the curtain. And they show you, and it's a goat. Okay, now, what do you prefer, the goat or $10,000? Unless it's a really fabulous goat, you choose the $10,000, right? So in that case, you know what the goods are, and so on. But suppose they don't show you. Suppose it's, well, whatever's behind the curtain over $10,000. Then it's like, ooh, harder to say, right? So one thing that makes this kind of choice difficult is that we don't always know what's on both sides. Another thing that makes it difficult is that there are probabilities attached. I mean, in this case, yeah, one you know what the quantity is, and the other you don't know at all. But often our choices are somewhat different. Should I major in philosophy or in chemical engineering? Well, there are different probabilities of different kinds of things that would result from that choice. And so you can think about the probabilities. So one difficulty, you might say, here is just ignorance. One difficulty is probabilities. It's just not certain what the outcome will be and what's going to happen. And if we want a simple example of that, just think about Vegas. You put your money down, you take your chances in a game of blackjack or roulette or something, and all you can say is the probability. It's not that there's something you don't know how it's going to turn out, but you know what the odds are, you just don't know how it's going to happen. A third thing, and this is what Socrates really stresses, is there's this short-term versus long-term perspective. And it's hard to make those judgments. So, would you rather have the pleasure of eating this thing now, or of waiting for some greater good, but that won't appear for a long time, where you're taking a risk now for an immediate pleasure, the risk is long-term, and so how do you make those comparisons? Does that make sense? Most choices are like that. But what I think he's saying here is, look, this wasn't a choice like that. It's not that I was comparing goods and I made the wrong choice. It's not that one was immediate and one was long-term, and I sacrificed the long-term good for the immediate gain. It's not really that I didn't know what I was doing. No, I knew what I was doing. And here's what I wanted. He says, yeah, there was thrill, there was excitement, blah, 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 but the fact is, what mattered to me was just doing something wrong. I felt and I loved the fall. Okay, I wanted to do something bad. I wanted to be a bad boy. Okay, and yay, it felt great to be bad. That's what he's saying. Now, this is a description of an adolescent thing, and you're closer to this sort of adolescent issue than I am. So tell me, what's your interpretation of this stealing the pears? Is he right that he was aiming at nothing good but an evil for its own sake? How do we understand this action? Yeah?
You say that so the excitement is the perceived good, but he's really still disordering good, it's not comparing them.
Okay. Yeah, there are some goods that seem to be involved here, right? I mean, what goods at least might he be aiming at? Well, one that he mentions is the excitement good. And so here's one interpretation. Look, actually, it's not. And I should say exactly how to interpret what he's saying here is unclear, because it goes back and forth between saying, ooh, I was doing it for the excitement, and I was doing it for no reason at all. But one possible interpretation is, look, in fact, you were aiming at some good. The excitement, the thrill of doing it, right? The thrill that you might be caught, the thrill of being bad. It's exciting to do something like this. And so maybe it's that, doing it for the excitement. What else might have been involved? Are there any other goods that might have been at stake that might be seeking? Yeah.
He talked about his friends, about how he would have been doing it if it weren't for the friends that kept him company.
Good. That's why he says actually the excitement is of a reason. He says, look, I would never have done it without the friends being there. I would never have done this alone. So it's not as if the excitement of doing it. It's not like I'm just walking all by myself and I see, there's some pears. Ooh, I might get caught. It says, no, I wouldn't have done it for that reason. So the excitement he thinks is not enough. But what about the friends? Maybe it's peer pressure. Maybe it's a desire for acceptance. Maybe it's just friends doing something together. And it's for the sake of the friendship. So what about that? Is that an adequate explanation? Maybe that's what's involved. There really is something good. It's friendship.
He talked at length about how he felt obligated to experience the shame of doing the wrong thing with them, and how that relationship was really important.
Right.
So I think for Augustine that was a good that was worth pursuing, even though it was in the wrong way.
Right. Yeah, so good. I mean, he does admit, look, these are goods that were involved. But what he says is there were goods that were involved, but actually they weren't the reason. So let's look carefully at what he says about the friends, because you're right, that's I think the closest he comes to actually sliding over thinking there really was a reason. Yeah.
Couldn't you say there's good friendships and bad friendships?
Okay, good. There can be good friendships and bad friendships. At one point, Confucius says, have no friends not equal to yourself. And why does he say that? Because basically, your friends are going to exert an influence on you. And so be around the kind of people who are going to turn you into the sort of person you want to be. Some people will bring out the best in you. Others will bring out the worst in you. So Confucius's point is be around people who are going to bring out the best in you. And it might be that this was a group of friends who brought out the worst in you. Now, one thing he does make clear is it's not as if all the others said, ooh, we want to steal some pears, come on. And he's saying, no, I don't want to. But come on, man, what are you chicken? It's not that kind of thing. It's not like that sort of peer pressure. He says, we decided to do it together. But it might be that each was bringing out the worst in the others. And so you're absolutely right. There are friendships that are good friendships and positive things, others that are not so positive. Maybe this was a friendship that was exerting a bad influence on him, and maybe they were all exerting a bad influence on each other. Other ideas. Let's take a look at what he actually says about this. He asks, in that act of theft, what was the object of my love? In what way did I viciously and perversely imitate my Lord? Was it my pleasure to break your law? My deceit, since I had the power to do it by force? Was I acting like a restricted liberty who does without punishment what is not permitted, thereby making an assertion of possessing a dim resemblance to omnipotence? So notice he's saying here, here's one thing that might have been at stake. Just this feeling of freedom, of imitating God, saying, look, I have the power to do this. Some people who have been brought up to be good, at a certain stage think, yeah, look, I've been typecast. I'm this kind of person. And they deliberately want to act out of character to just show, yeah, I'm more than you think I am. And so maybe it was that kind of thing. Maybe it was a good kid saying, I'm tired of being good all the time. I'm going to show you I'm more than just this good little kid. And so now actually, if you read up to this point, he wasn't that good a kid, right? He admits he was cheating games all the time, and he was obsessed with the idea of winning, and so forth. And so actually, it's like, really? You weren't that great, so I'm not sure that that makes a great deal of sense. But nevertheless, maybe there's that kind of thing going on here. Yeah?
Maybe you're good in a sense of trying to rest in something that you think is true as opposed to what others say is true. So instead of, like, if Aristotle believes in God, Augustine believes in God and saying God's truth is supposed to be his good, maybe him stealing the pears is a way of saying, this is the way that life really should be. This is Augustine's plan for life. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to try and make this my good.
Good, yes. So it's connected to this point about freedom. It's sort of like living by my own rules. Kant at one point says, true freedom, autonomy, is living by rules you set for yourself. And Nietzsche has a section in the genealogy of moral theory is in effect criticizing this, saying, actually, no, it's breaking the rules. And this is actually close to the passage where he talks about, the image of the lion, the blonde beast rising and going over the plains in search of prey. And he seems to suggest that's actually a sort of noble ideal. Well, in any case, it might be that thought, living by your own rules. By the way, I know some of you pointing out here, yeah, that's really hard to read. My handwriting is going downhill for no apparent reason. But yeah, living by my own rules. So it might be that. Maybe that's what he's saying. So I'm tired of living by your rules. I'm going to show I can live by my own rules. I'll steal a pear if I want to steal a pear. I'm going to break the rules, and there might be something pleasurable in that act of rebellion itself. Anything else that might be a sort of motive, a reason for adolescent rebellion of this sort? Yeah.
I was just going to suggest, kind of on the same as Part D, living by my own rules. I liken it to a kid, being told not to stick their finger in an electrical socket, and the first thing they do is put it as close to the socket as they can just to get a rise out of their parents. So there's not necessarily a perceived good that you're going to get out of doing that, other than, doing it for the sake of evil itself, that it is disobedient, that you want to live by your own rules, and that it's your own will counteracting someone else's.
Ah, good, yes. So notice, right, it is living by your own rules. I like the way you put it there. Your own will. Exerting the power of your own will. He says, in a sense, this might have been me imitating the omnipotence of God by showing, look, I have a certain kind of power too. I can act. So you tell me not to put my finger in the socket? I say, oh yeah. I once saw my brother try to do that. So I went rushing over. He was like just a little baby. And I sort of grabbed him and pulled him away from the socket. So I got in trouble because then he started crying. And my parents came over. What are you doing here, brother? It was like that a lot when I was a kid. He was always getting me. I was the good kid, right? He was a brat. He was always getting me into trouble. And this isn't just a big brother talking. Later, when I went to high school in Connecticut, he went to the same high school. One point, he was called into the principal's office. And the principal said, look, a lot of things go bad at this school. A lot of things go wrong. And you're never directly involved. But I know you're responsible for all of it. You're like the godfather of this school. And he was absolutely right. My brother just put people up to things all the time and got everybody else in trouble, but somehow himself never got into trouble. He's now a banker. Well, anyhow, yeah, so... Yeah, never mind, that's a long story. So, yes, this can be part of it, an assertion of your own will. So all of those might be possibilities. Now, he goes on to say, look, had I been alone, I could not have done it. I remember my state of mind. Alone, I would never have done it. Therefore, my loving act was to be associated with a gang whose company I did it. So notice he's giving us an argument here. He's saying, look, all by myself, I would not have done this. So although I admit it was exciting, I admit that it was an assertion of freedom. I admit that I was living by my own rules and it felt good to be disobedient. I was asserting the power of my own will. Nevertheless, he says, all of these things... starting here. Why am I starting them? Well, this asterisk indicates, look, it's not anything like the reason. He seems to suggest it's not even part of the reason. Why I wouldn't have done it by myself. It's got to be this. There was something about being with the other people that was involved here. None of the rest would have added up to nearly enough reason for me to do this. And so he's saying, was it this? Well, yeah, there was that feeling. I did, but I wasn't doing it for the sake of that feeling. That's not why I did it. In fact, without the friends being there, I would never have done it. So we can go back to this. So it's for the sake of friendship, peer pressure, or something like that. But now he says, yeah, my pleasure was not in the pears. It was in the crime itself, done in association with a sinful group. What was my state of mind? It is quite certain that it was utterly shameful and a disgrace to me that I had it. Yet what was it? Who understands his sins? It was all done for a giggle, as if our hearts were tickled to think we were deceiving those who would not think us capable of such behavior, and would have profoundly disapproved. Why then did I derive pleasure? Notice that sort of this defeating people's expectations that I was mentioning in conjunction with the freedom. He says, why then did I derive pleasure from an act I would not have done on my own? Is it that nobody can easily laugh when alone? Well, certainly no one readily laughs when alone, but sometimes laughter overcomes individuals when no one else is present. But he says, I couldn't have done it by myself. Friendship can be a dangerous enemy. a seduction of the mind lying beyond the reach of investigation. Out of a game and a jest came an avid desire to do injury and an appetite to inflict loss on someone else, without any motive on my part, personal gain and no pleasure in settling a score. As soon as the words are spoken, let us go and do it. One is ashamed not to be shameless. Now that, I think, is a very interesting line. One is ashamed not to be shameless. Do you get this?
If you don't commit a shameful act, then you're not really part of the in-group. You're out of the group. So you feel ashamed to be separated from the group in that capacity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You end up having this sort of shame, a feeling shame. This shame not to be shameless. And it's associated in something with the group. What's involved? Yeah.
But I think that quote means that he feels bad not feeling bad.
Oh, he feels bad at not feeling bad?
Yeah.
Well, he certainly does. But actually, I thought he was getting at something else, so let me see if I... Yeah, you're with a group of friends, and one of them says, hey, let's do such and such. And you feel ashamed of not wanting to do it. So let's... I mean, nobody's ever come up to me and said, hey, man, let's steal some pears. So I can't relate to this specific example. But there are surely cases like this, where somebody says, hey, tell you what, let's do such and such. And you think, oh, that's a bad idea. But you feel ashamed of that feeling, right? And so you're afraid to say, no, look, that's wrong. What are some examples? I'm not asking for personal confessions here. You can imaginatively put yourself in the place of someone if you want. Imagine, or refer to literature or great art like The Simpsons or something like that. But yeah, what's a case that we might have experienced that's like this? Yeah.
I was thinking of like Vietnam or like wartime, to where soldiers have done atrocious things in the company of others because of like the groups. It's like burning down civilian villages and things like that, where like the main objective might have been good, but then after that there was like residual evil that just happened because of it.
Okay, right, yes. One person says, man, these people betrayed us, I'm tired of this. They start setting fire to the village. And you say, but no, this is wrong. Remember the categorical imperative. Remember the golden rule. Good grief, man. Think of the principle of utility. Love your neighbor as yourself. Right? You might well feel ashamed to say any of those things, right? And in fact, some of you are smirking like, yeah, that guy's got a gun. Maybe you shouldn't do this. It might not just be fear. It's really, you feel shame at feeling shame. Okay, so now that's an extreme thing that most of us, fortunately, haven't experienced. But it's the kind of thing that can take place in all sorts of social settings. Somebody starts misbehaving. And you're put in this position of thinking, oh, this isn't good. But now, do you stop it? Do you have the courage in part to say no? And I think he's diagnosing something interesting here. It's not just cowardice or something. You feel ashamed of feeling the way you do. Okay? And it's not just, in short, I'm afraid to say anything. It's, I feel ashamed of actually being a good person and feeling this sense of shame. Now, what's something a little closer to that illustrates this? Yeah.
Eating something on the while you're grocery shopping and forgetting about it when you're checking out.
Oh, yes, they're grapes. And you think, oh, let me see if these grapes are any good. Oh, pretty good. It might, now suppose, right, you're with somebody else to get to this point. If you're doing it alone, well, that's a different thing. But if somebody says, oh, try these, they're excellent, right? You might feel a sense of shame saying, no, look, I'm not going to eat grapes without paying for them. Or if you tell me they're good, that's fine. Let's get some. I'll eat them later. You might feel like, oh, yeah, I feel ashamed of feeling like this is wrong, so you go along with it and do it. Other cases like that, where you go along with something even though you know it's not right. Yeah.
Going out to South by Southwest, and you have a particularly promiscuous roommate, and you're taken, and he kind of tries to convince you to go and...
Okay, say no more. Okay, yeah, it might be that kind of thing, right? This person here says, hey, let's pick up some girls. And you think, I don't know. And, look, how about those two over there? Come on, right? And so you sort and so forth. So it could well be that yeah, at a certain point, it's not that the other person is making you do this exactly, it's just that you feel ashamed of feeling shame. You feel ashamed to sort of get off the boat. Now, that's one consideration he introduces. There's another, which is he said, look, it's not as if anybody made me do it. We decided this together. And so he ends up saying, it's not a question of the friends exactly saying, hey, let's do this thing. And he's saying, oh, it's really like somehow we, this game, right, degenerated bit by bit with this sort of thing. And we kind of together did this. And so it's that too suggests, look, it's not just a friendship, because somehow we all made this decision together. But why did we do it? It would be strange to say, hey, well, let's all do something bad because it'll build up our friendship. And so why did we all do this? Because each of the other people might do the same thing, right? Maybe there was a bad guy who was a ringleader saying, hey, I got it, let's steal some pears. But that's not really the way he describes it. It's like the whole group together decided this. And so you really can't say, well, they made me do it. No, what on earth did make them do it? So there's something really unusual about this case. In effect, he's saying, look, yeah, I felt this sense of shame and feeling shame, but on the other hand, we together decided. And so it's strange to think that it was the friendship itself that was really the reason. It looks like it wasn't the reason. So he ends up concluding, look, yes, there were goods that were involved. It's not as if there was nothing good that resulted from this. I felt this thrill of doing something wrong. I felt this assertion of freedom. I felt this assertion of my own will. I felt something connected to friendship. And yet, none of those were really the reason. He ends up saying, look, in the end, I did it for no positive reason at all, except that it was bad. That's why we all chose to do it. We wanted to do something bad. Okay? And so, now, notice the example here. He steals pear. Does that remind you of the fall? The fall, exactly. And he describes it in terms of his own fall, right? I fell and I loved it. And so there is an analogy here. This is part of the reason I think he goes into this in such detail. With the original fall. The fall. Okay? With Adam and Eve eating the apple. Once again, it's a piece of fruit. A piece of fruit plucked wrongly. And why did they do it? I think it's something that is in the background of his description here. Why on earth did Adam and Eve fall? They were there in the garden. Things were perfect. Why would you eat the fruit? Well, answer is, God, for the thrill of doing it? Maybe there was a thrill of doing it, but that surely wasn't the reason. For the assertion of freedom? The living by, their own rules and not God's will? Well, again, probably they felt some of that exhilaration. But that wasn't why. Because they did it together? Well, not really. For one thing, they didn't. Eve did it first. But for another, it's not like Adam did it because, gosh, I felt ashamed of Eve did this, and was I going to be the guy who said, oh, Eve, you did something wrong, you're in big trouble, I'm not going to do it. No, maybe, but in effect, I think he's saying, well, they did it for no reason at all. They did something evil for the sake of evil. It's not that you can say there was some other good, it's just that they didn't know. Or that, they were just assessing the probabilities and maybe were unlucky or got it wrong. Or they couldn't, really deal with it. The apple was tasty right now, and getting thrown out of the garden, that was a long-term thing. No, it wasn't anything like that. It was something that was evil for the sake of evil. Yeah.
And he says that, having no reason is equal to evil because evil is privation of good.
Well, we're going to get to that. It is true that evil is, in a certain sense, evil turns out to be a nothingness, a pure negation of something. And so it's a lack, it's an absence, it's a privation. And so you're right, it turns out doing it for the sake of evil and doing it for no reason at all actually come to the same thing. So that's a great point. Doing it for no reason or for the sake of evil, doing evil for its own sake, you're right. Since evil is a nothingness, really, those come to the same thing. So that's a very good observation. For a long time, being a Manichaean, thinking there's a good force in the universe and a bad force in the universe, he was thinking, look, evil is its own special thing. But here he's in effect saying, no, it's not that, oh, there was an evil and I chose the evil. The evil's nothing. There was no reason at all. So it's not that, ooh, there was the attraction of the evil whenever a path was. It wasn't evil sitting on one side of the scale. There was nothing on one side of the scale that made him do it. Okay, well that's one thing I wanted to talk about in connection with good and evil. The next thing is weakness of will. We might see this as an example of weakness of will, and he has a very interesting view of that. Yeah?
I have a question.
Sure.
Doesn't that restrict to evil? Doesn't that restrict to that? Isn't the definition of evil in that context too stringent? Like it's just the absence of something? Like what about like killing for the sake of killing? Like that's not the absence of something. Like what if you get pleasure out of killing somebody? And we would consider that, conventionally we would consider that like immoral. We would think that was evil.
Right, right.
So
yeah, so
Augustine doesn't think you can kill for the sake of killing.
no, I know that, but the definition kind of makes you believe.
well,
It makes you believe that.
it's an interesting question, actually. There are people who kill others because what? Well, because they're driven by, as he puts it, lust or envy or a variety of other things where they think there's some good that they're gaining. But some murderers aren't like that. In fact, the sort of stereotype of a serial killer, that person isn't gaining anything, right? It's not that, you were cheating with my wife, so I kill you. Or, I mean, it's nothing like that. Instead, is it ignorance? Well, no. The person knows what they're doing. Is it probabilities? No. Is it a short-term versus a long-term thing? Well, no. So it's a very similar thing to this. Is it for the excitement of killing? Well, maybe. Is it, I mean, usually this isn't done in groups, though I suppose it could be. If you had a gang, it might be connected to this. For this freedom of or living by your own rules, well, maybe. And all those might accompany this. On the other hand, are you doing it for that? Now, somebody could. You could actually be doing it for the excitement or for the assertion of freedom. But also, I think he's saying it would be possible to do it for no reason at all. You just do it because it's evil. And just like stealing the pears, it would be possible to, in fact, steal someone's life for just no positive reason at all. Maybe these things accompany it, but that wouldn't be enough to make you do it. It's something else. And is it a pure negation? Yeah, I'm going to try to say a little bit about this without going into it in great detail, because I want to save it for next time. He's really bothered by the problem of evil. It's what makes him give up Christianity and for about 10 years become a Manichaean. He wants an explanation to the existence of evil. And so he says, well, if God is the explanation for the existence of good, there must be an evil being that is the explanation for evil. And eventually he comes to see, basically what happens is he reads Plotinus. And Plotinus has this view that evil is just the absence of good. And he ends up saying, aha, I see now how it goes. So to give it to you in a nutshell, here I think is the view he has about this in the end. God is a perfect being. Can God create another perfect being? No, there couldn't be two perfect beings, as we've seen. That was an exam question. Why can't there be two omnipotent beings, for example? Well, this one would have the power to destroy that one. This one would have the power not to be destroyed by that one. And so, in fact, that couldn't be. So, if God's going to create anything at all, God has to create something perfect. Now, think of this as perfection. Really, it's an infinite thing, but imagine that there's a sort of limit here. God's creating things that are finite. God's creating things that are by definition imperfect, incorruptible, capable of evil. They may not actually be doing anything wrong now, but they are corruptible, they are imperfect, and liable. It is possible for them. They have capacity to do something wrong. Now, that gap between what could be and is in the first of God, and is not in the thing itself, that's evil. That gap between perfection and what is. Now, what is good to the extent that it is. And so he says everything that is good, but things are limited and more or less limited. And so basically evil is what we call that gap between perfection and what there is. Now, here's the thing. That gap is inevitable if God is going to create anything at all. So for God to create at all is for God to permit the possibility of evil. But nevertheless, that evil isn't a positive thing in the world. It's not like God makes the world and says it's good, and then says, oh, but it would be more interesting if there were some evil and not great evil too. No, evil is that gap, that lack, that absence, that imperfection, the failure of creation to be able to live up to the perfect level of God. Yeah.
If evil is between what is perfect and what is, then it essentially is in the space of what is not, so you can say that evil exists.
Really, you can't say that evil exists. That's right. In a certain sense, his answer to the problem of evil is, really, in the most fundamental sense, evil doesn't exist. Evil is an absence. And so, does evil exist? That's like the question of, well, are there lacks? Are there absences? Are there holes? There's a very funny paper by David Lewis on the question of whether or not there are holes. Are there holes in the world? Well, in one sense, the answer is obviously yes. My wonderful Loden green jacket has a hole in the back of the mothing. And so I think, yeah, there are holes. There's one in my jacket. On the other hand, you want to say, well, but a hole isn't really a thing, right? It's just an absence of fabric, one luckily very small point. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what he exactly said, but right, he's saying in effect, evil is like holes. It's like absences, lacks. Yeah.
He couldn't make them omnipotent, but couldn't he have made them omnibenevolent?
Ooh, good question. God can't make other beings omnipotent, because then we get into this contradiction. But couldn't he make a being that was omnibenevolent, that was entirely good? After all, yeah, now we really are getting into the subject matter next time. But, yes, at one point he says, why, indeed, can't we solve the whole problem this way? In fact, he says, my teachers taught me this. It's free will, okay? They gave the free will defense. How is there evil in the world? It's our fault. We freely chose evil. And so God gave us the power of choice. That was a good thing, but we chose evil. He doesn't think that's an adequate explanation because he says, well, wait a minute. Okay, we chose evil. Who gave us the character which enabled us to choose evil and inclined us in some cases toward evil? So basically he says, you're right. Couldn't God have made us omnibenevolent? Couldn't God have made us incapable of choosing evil? And if that's right, then you can't really blame it on us. After all, God's the one who gave us not only the free will and the capacity to choose the wrong thing, but even this tendency to choose the wrong thing. So indeed, why couldn't God have made us at least that perfect? So you're right, he doesn't think that sort of explanation will work, but that also suggests that this simple gap argument I gave, and which actually comes not from the Confessions, but another of his works, the Enchiridion, is not the full story either. In fact, I don't think he ever settles on the full story to the answer to the problem of evil. At this point, he thinks the key is to see evil as an absence. But as you point out, that by itself isn't enough. You need more. You need to say, well, okay, yes, we're imperfect, but we're imperfect in a very specific kind of way. We're corruptible, he says, but not just corruptible in the sense that our flesh decays, also morally corruptible. But why did God make us morally corrupt? That doesn't seem inevitable. And so, what's the real story behind that? It's not, in other words, just a gap. It's a certain kind of gap. And it's not clear that that gap was inevitable. So what's the story there? Anyway, we'll talk more about that next time. But it is, I think you're right to say, look, that the gap story, as nice as it is, and as fond as I am of giving it as a solution, can't be the full story. Maybe it's part of the story. Now, to weakness of will. At this point, our enemy is really Plato. But he talks about the kinds of wickedness. And then, yeah, this is where he's getting close to his conversion. I had no clear grasp of the cause of evil, but he begins thinking about what he describes as the iron of his own choice. So, he says, yeah, why is it that I can know the better and do the worse? Well, he says, the enemy had a grip on my will, and so made a chain for me to hold me as a prisoner. The consequence of a distorted will is passion. By servitude to passion, habit is formed, and habit to which there is no resistance becomes necessity. This is kind of a combination of Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle, the stress on habit, but Plato, this idea of something holding me as a prisoner, passion, the spirited and appetitive elements of the soul. He says, by these links, a harsh bondage held me under restraint. The new will, which was beginning to be within me a will to serve you freely and enjoy you freely, the only sure source of pleasure, was not yet strong enough to conquer my older will, which had the strength of old man. So my two wills, one old, the other new, one carnal, the other spiritual, were in conflict with one another, and their discord robbed my soul of all concentration. So far, it sounds like he's really taking a sort of Platonic answer. There are different parts of me, right? And actually, it's sort of, that filtered through Paul, there's the spirit and the flesh. And so I've got the spiritual will, but also this fleshly will, and they're in competition with one another. So far, it sounds like Paul and like Plato. But he says, okay, I read about how the flesh lusts against the spirit against the flesh. That's Galatians. So he's quoting Paul. I was split between them. He says, but I was responsible for the fact that habit had become so embattled against me, for it was with my consent that I came to the place in which I did not wish to be. So he's in effect saying, yeah, there were these two wills in me, but here's the thing, I encouraged the one, okay? It's not like, oh yeah, I just found that there was this stranger inside of me asking me to do these things, demanding that I do these things I didn't want to do. No, it wasn't quite like that. He says, the law of sin is the violence of habit, by which even the unwilling mind is dragged down and held as it deserves to be, since by its own choice it slipped into that habit. Wretched man that I was, here he's quoting Romans, who would deliver me from this body of death. Now, yes, he's going through this, and this great prayer. Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet. So that in itself is reflecting in these two wills, right? The one will saying, yes, let me to conquer the flesh, Lord, but not yet. A little while longer, let me move around. Anyway, so he's then coming up with his own distinctive solution. And he says, all right, suppose I do something wrong, even though I know better. He says, I did that because to do so was my will. I could have willed this and then not done it if my limbs hadn't possessed the power to obey. So I did many actions in which the will to act was not equal by the power. Yet I was not doing what, with an incomparably greater longing, I yearned to do and could have done though I so resolved. For as soon as I had the will, I would have had a wholehearted will. At this point, the power to act is identical with the will. The willing itself was performative of the action. Nevertheless, it did not happen. Now he says, what's the cause of this monstrous situation? Why is it the case? May your mercy illuminate me, as if I ask perhaps an answer to be found in the hidden punishments and secret tribulations that befall the sons of Adam. What causes this monstrous fact, this division, this conflict within the self? He says, why is it so? The mind commands the body, and it's instantly obeyed. Body, raise your hand. See? Right away happens. The mind commands itself and meets resistance. The mind commands the hand to move, and it does. But mind is mind, the hand is body. The mind orders the mind to will. The recipient of the order is itself, yet it does not perform it. Why does this happen? Now, he gives us a kind of answer. He says, the willing is not wholehearted, so the command is not wholehearted. The strength of the command lies in the strength of the will, and the degree to which the command is not performed lies in the degree to which the will is not engaged. For it is the will that commands the will to exist, and it commands not another will, but itself. So the will that commands is incomplete, and therefore what commands does not happen. So we've got this unwilling willing, this incomplete will. He says if it were complete, it wouldn't need to command the will to exist, it would exist already. Therefore, there is no monstrous split between willing and not willing. We're dealing with a morbid condition of the mind, which when it's lifted up by the truth does not unreservedly rise to it, but is weighed down by habit. So there are two wills, neither of them is complete. So, he says, you might think then we have two minds, two distinct natures, one good, the other bad. They really evil themselves when they entertain these evil thoughts. So that's not really quite the right answer either. He says, the self which willed to serve was identical with the self which was unwilling. It was I. I was neither wholly willing nor wholly unwilling, so I was in conflict with myself and was dissociated from myself. The dissociation came about against my will. So, here is the picture that he attributes to Paul and Plato. I've got, in any relevant case of conflict, two wills, right? There's one part of me that's pulling me in this direction, another part of me that's pulling in that direction. So it might be the flesh and the spirit, or in Plato, it might be reason versus typically desire. But in any case, that's what's going on. And he says, that can't be right. Okay, no. It is I. It is one being. And the contradictory impulses affect me alone. It is happening within myself. Now, why does he say this? What's the significance of it? Well, he says, now, look, this is a freely chosen sin. If there are as many contrary natures as there are wills in someone beset by indecision, there will be not 2 wills, but many. Now, he gives this wonderful argument. In Plato, you have 3 kinds, 3 parts of the soul, right? And so you've got 3 possible kinds of conflict. You've got a conflict between reason and desire, between reason and appetite, between appetite and desire. Sorry, between reason and desire, reason and emotion, between desire and emotion. Those are the only 3 possible choices. In Paul, you've only got 2 parts, flesh versus spirit. So there's one kind of conflict, flesh versus spirit. But then he says, wait a minute, there are all sorts of kinds of conflict that are possible. Even within reason, even within emotion, even within desire, even within the flesh or within the spirit. So he gives some examples. He says, suppose I'm a thief. And I think, this isn't his example exactly, but it's close. Should I steal the Porsche or the BMW? Ooh, Porsches are awesome. They look great. On the other hand, the BMW is so precise and tight. Oh, which shall I steal? That thief feels conflict here. But where's the spirit? Right? This is purely at the level of the flesh. This is one desire versus another. And so it looks as if, and they're both bad, that kind of conflict is possible. He says it can be the same thing for the person who's good. This person says, I think I'll study the Bible today. Should I read the Psalms? Or read the Gospels? Or read Paul's letters? Oh, I don't know. That's a hard, right? They're all good, right? But that's a conflict within the spirit. And so he says, look, Plato has this principle. No one thing can experience conflicting, contrary impulses. Whenever there's that kind of conflict, you've got to break it apart. And Augustine is in effect saying, that's got to be wrong, because we wouldn't just end up with 2 or 3 parts of the soul, we would end up with millions of parts of the soul. Every single desire, every single emotion could conflict with any other desire or emotion, and so, let's just say with any other, with some other. And so it's going to be the case that you will get many different kinds. I've got this, suppose you feel a feeling of love towards someone else. How can that come into conflict with another emotion? Easily, right? You fall in love with yet another person. Or you have this desire to eat lunch. How could that come into conflict with another desire? Yeah, you have a desire to work, or a friend says, hey, let's go to a movie, or blah, blah, blah. I mean, you could desire to do something else as well. So desires can conflict, emotions can conflict, and even rational considerations, there can be conflicting ones. So his idea is, well, that will shatter the self into a million different pieces. The fact is, there's one self. But here's the idea. Sometimes I will willingly. Completely. Other times I will unwillingly. Okay? And what does that mean? Well, basically, here's the idea. I have certain desires. Right? I want blah, blah, blah. Or I think I should do such and such. I will do such and such. But then we also have some that are higher order. I will to will. That's wrong. And here's the thing. Some of my first order desires or willings are accompanied by appropriate higher order desires. I want to study the Psalms, let's say, and I want to study the Psalms, so that's all good. But maybe I want to steal a BMW. I don't want to steal. Now, if I want to steal a BMW, then I'm just bad, right? But if we've got a case of weakness of will, it says, here's what's going on. It's not just that I want this and I want the opposite of that. I have a desire that I don't want to have. I want to steal the BMW, but I know it's wrong. Or I want to steal the pear, but I know it's wrong, so I don't want to steal the pear. Nevertheless, I do want it. Okay? And so he says, I can, in the end, now I can't get off the hook. I can't really quite go along, he says, with Paul, when Paul says, it's not I that sin, it's the sin that dwells within me. He says, well, actually, no, I'm sinning, because I am willing to steal the pear. On the other hand, I am willing it unwilling. I will steal the pear in the end. I make the choice, but I don't will to have that will. I don't want to have that desire for the pear. I don't want to do wrong. I mean, I don't want to do wrong. I don't want to do wrong. Yet the fact is, in the end, I do choose it. So the reason he goes from want to will is he says what matters here isn't the underlying desire, but the choice. And then some choices I make entirely willingly. I choose to choose that way. But other choices we make against our own wills. So the will can come into conflict with itself. And that, in the end, is his solution to this sort of problem. We'll come back to this when we get to Ansel, who thinks he's completely wrong.